Okay, welcome back to a Between the Pages book chat, and we're here today with author Justin Lee Anderson, and we're going to be talking about his book, The Lost War, and it's from his Eidyn series. Did I pronounce that right?
Eidyn.
Eidyn. Okay, I wasn't sure which one it was.
That's okay.
Of course, I went with the wrong one. But anyway, okay, so I'll turn it over to you, and you can introduce yourself. So take it away.
Thanks a lot. Yeah, I'm Justin Lee Anderson. And as you said, my latest book is The Lost War, which hopefully is lit enough for you to see it well there. It's the first book in the Eidyn trilogy. It's I describe it as an epic fantasy mystery. It's set in a fantasy kingdom based on the history, mythology, and the etymology of a lot of my hometown Edinburgh's place names. It's essentially... a lot of the characters were based on role-played characters for a start, so it's got a really traditional kind of epic fantasy feel to it, but it's also a bit of a mashup because there is a strong mystery element to it, with a little bit of political allegory thrown in there. So while it's got a lot of the traditional tropes of fantasy, I suppose, it's also got quite a lot that is a bit different, I think.
Yeah, you mentioned it was based on the history of Edinburgh. Do you have any Scottish folklore elements in it, or Celtic mythology, or is it just basically the history of the city?
It's more to do with specifically Edinburgh rather than sort of general Scottish or Celtic stuff. So there's a lot of... Edinburgh has a lot of, for example, old like ghost stories, for example. And even just not even ghost stories, actually just fairly gruesome tales of things that happened in Edinburgh in the past. So, you know, that without spoilers, there's one historical character who's kind of a famous wasn't he supernatural character who inspired one of the characters in the book. There's a very famous tale of something fairly gruesome that happened in Edinburgh on the day the Act of Union was signed, which inspires a scene in the book. So it's things like that. It's, you know, I suppose it's the folk history and the mythology of Edinburgh.
Yeah. Well, that sounds fascinating. I'm big on the folklore from places. So
cool.
Yeah, Nova Scotia's full of ghost stories and weird things. So.
Oh, excellent.
Anyway, so why don't you tell us a little bit about the main character of the book?
Okay, sure. So the main character is Aranok. He is a Drai, which is the Gaelic word for druid or wizard. And in the world of Eidyn, being able to use magic is rare. It's something that people are generally looked down on for. And there's quite a lot of prejudice against people who have this ability. He is the first Drow ever to be elevated to a position as high as King's Envoy. And the story begins in the aftermath of a fairly brutal war, where he fought alongside the king against another Drow, a very powerful demon summoner and necromancer. And in the aftermath of the war, the country is a mess. And he is tasked by the king with taking a group of strangers, essentially, all bar one, to restore a foreign queen who has been deposed and is currently hiding in their country. And he sends them off to restore this queen to her throne in the hopes of creating an ally for the country while they try to rebuild. But very quickly, they start to discover that things are not as they expect them to be. And they start to wonder why and what's behind it and what's actually happening underneath that they're not understanding, because nothing seems to be as they expect it to be.
Ooh, very intriguing. So this conflict they come up against, is there an antagonist behind that, or is it sort of like various things that they have to work their way through?
Exactly. That's the question. They have to work out who's behind this and why. I mean, the suspicion starts to fall fairly naturally on the Drow that they have just been at war with, who is trapped in what was the seat of the king in Dunedin Castle, which is right in the center of the country. And he is trapped within there, but they start to suspect that perhaps he has influence either via allies, or is he managing to use powers from within the castle, even though he's trapped in there? So they naturally start to suspect that, but a big part of it is, well, they're not even certain what's actually going on. So a part of it is who's behind this, but another part of it is what's actually happening here, because it's difficult to track down who's responsible for something when you can't fully understand why things are not the way they should be.
Yeah, so there's a little bit of a mystery going on there as well, is there?
Exactly. Which is why I'd kind of sort of say, for all that it has you'll get your traditional fantasy tropes of the quest and the team coming together, but there's a lot in here that isn't necessarily traditionally part of fantasy novels, I think.
Yeah. So, what's the best trait of your main character, and what's the worst trait?
Ooh, what's his best trait? I don't know. Oh, he tries very hard to do the right thing for other people, and I think that's he genuinely wants to make the world better, and I think that's probably the best thing about him. His worst trait is he doesn't trust people. He suspects everybody of having some kind of agenda, or of he's expecting to be double crossed. There are maybe 5 people in his life that he absolutely trusts and nobody else. And so he pushes people away because of that. And he pisses them off, basically. So he does not easily attract people to him because they see him as hard work, because he does not welcome new people into his world.
Okay, so you mentioned the king. Is your fantasy world sort of like based on medieval feudal system, or is there another basis for the world?
It's loosely pseudo medieval, yeah. I mean, it's basically so Eidyn is run by a monarchy. So there is a king. The king literally took the throne by force. And Aranok was part of that uprising. They removed an unpopular king during a war some years before the previous war. So the kingdom has been through 2 wars in the relatively recent past. One essentially an uprising, a civil war, and the other a war against this other Drai. But so yes, the kingdom of Eidyn is run like that. But that's not necessarily how the world works. For example, and this is going to get explored more deeply in book 2, which I'm writing at the moment. But outside of Eidyn, for example, immediately to the south is Reaverlands, which are basically run by chieftains of different small clans who kind of have a loose arrangement to not attack each other. And they're essentially raiders. They're based on the Borders Reavers. They also have a sort of a Viking influence in terms of how they operate. So yeah, the 2 different countries next to each other have very different sort of governmental structures, I suppose.
Okay, so what were your inspirations or your reasons for writing the series?
So basically 3 things came together to make The Lost War happen. One, as I said, was I wanted to write a book that was set in the kingdom based on Edinburgh's history and mythology and etymology. And I used to, one of the things I used to do was write a guidebook to Edinburgh. And so I knew that it had this rich history and this really interesting, stories and backgrounds, mythology, and I wanted to do something with that. The second was that I had these characters that friends and I had role played over a lot of years. And I really liked them. They lasted a long time. I think they lasted at least 5 years. And I wanted to do something with them because they were really interesting characters. I really enjoyed them. And then the third thing was I had an idea for a story taking a sort of political and social allegory from literally like modern day and transporting it to a fantasy setting and writing it in that kind of setting. And it was a while before I realized that all 3 of those ideas were one book. And then once I did, and I realized those pieces all fit together really nicely, it just came together beautifully. So the driving force, I suppose, was the storyline I wanted to tell. But it was really exciting to realize that I could do it with these characters I was excited about and with the setting I was excited about as well.
Okay, so what was the hardest scene for you to write in the book?
Oh, without spoilers, probably the climax right at the end of the book, because literally everything builds towards it. And I was very, very conscious of having to get it right. Because if I'd got that one scene wrong, I think it would have been a really damp squib, because the rest of the book would have suffered for it, basically. I was very conscious of having to get the pacing right for a start, but also there's a big reveal in there. And when to reveal that and how to lead up to that and tease it and then reveal it in such a way that it was surprising but fulfilling and made sense at the same time. I spent a lot of time working on that chapter, making sure that I got, and I think it's the second last chapter. And in fact, it definitely is the second last chapter. And I know that because in the first draft, it was the last chapter, and I finished on the reveal, and my wife threatened to kill me if I didn't write another chapter and explain all the things, all the questions that were raised by that reveal. She was like, no, give me another chapter. I need to know all these things.
Yeah, you got to have the wrap up.
Exactly. I thought, I'll end on a cliffhanger of a reveal, and that'll be interesting, and people will be really keen to read the second book. My wife was like, no, give me answers now, or I will never forgive you. It's like, okay, fair enough.
Yes, your readers will thank you too.
I'm confident that my readers are probably grateful to my wife for insisting on that last chapter, because otherwise I think I might have really annoyed quite a lot of people. I'm definitely grateful to her for the advice. That's for sure.
Yeah, I'm going to be ending on a cliffhanger in one of my upcoming books, and I hope they don't hate me because it's kind of necessary. But anyway, so
I think I could have got away with ending on a cliffhanger. I ended on a bit of a twist and a cliffhanger, and I think that I don't know that I was going to get away with it. Not with both of them.
So, what was your favorite scene to write in the book?
Again, with that, it's difficult to say without spoilers. There is one scene that is a self-contained scene out with the timeline of the main story, I suppose. And it was, for one scene, it was introducing a completely new character in a completely new setting. And it had to have a sense of urgency. I had to introduce that character and make the readers care about her quickly. It had to have a sense of urgency. It needed pathos. It needed tension. And I think that it worked out really well. It's funny, I'd pulled my back at the time, and I was actually on quite a heavy dose of diazepam while I was writing it. And I think in a way it helped, because it relaxed me and allowed me to just write without overthinking it. But I also fell asleep halfway through writing it at the keyboard at one point, and so I woke up to see just a load of nonsense written on the screen because I just passed out at the keyboard. And also, actually, even better than that, I remember I was feeling really sluggish, and I remember trying to think of a new way of saying that. You've got that whole thing of the crowd parted like and I was like, what's something different that a crowd could part like that isn't a cliche? And when I woke up, I realized I had settled on the crowd parted like a coconut. It's like, where did I get that from? that did not make the final edit.
That would have been interesting to have the crowd part like a coconut, because it kind of would have just like split violently.
Exactly. Violently split in half with a crack and fall away to the sides. No, that doesn't work. That's not how crowds part. That's a really terrible, terrible simile. But I mean, the next line was literally like QBJYXZ, because I fell asleep with my fingers on the keyboard. So, but I genuinely, I'm not kidding when I say I actually think writing in that sort of slightly subdued state probably made it a better scene, because I wasn't overthinking it. I just wrote it as it came to me, and I think it worked. And I've had readers tell me it's their favorite scene, which is kind of nice in that I know what went into writing it, but at the same time, slightly weird in that it's the only scene in which like most of the characters don't appear. So, oh well. But yeah, that was a good scene to write.
So, do any of your secondary characters steal the scenes or have quirky little personalities?
Without question. So the main character is Aronok, who was a player that a character that I played when he was a roleplay character. His bodyguard is a woman called Alandria. She's an archer and a warrior who is his constant companion, his closest friend. She is most commonly. She's one of my point of view characters. I have 5, 6 point of view characters. She's one of them. And by far, out of the people who've said they have a favorite character, most people's favorite character tends to be Alandria. So yeah, she's definitely a scene stealer. They have a really good relationship that I really like. And it's funny, one of our kids actually said they see my wife's and my relationship in their relationship, which I like. It's sweet. I can totally see where it's coming from. But yeah, they have a good relationship, and I like their relationship. And a lot of there's a lot of banter between them, and a lot of taking the mick out of each other, as well as obviously they're absolutely relying on each other. But yeah, I think Alandria tends to steal the scene. The other one is Samali, who is a late teens, early 20s religious knight, and she is she's very unusual. She's very straightforward in her thinking, but absolutely badass. She's a member of the Order of the White Thorn, who's been trained since she was young, essentially to fight demons as part of this religious order. And second runner-up to Alandria's favorite character tends to be Samali. Yeah.
Okay, so which character would you like to hang out with in real life?
Oh, all of them, probably. They do. I mean, because I've known them for so long as such, they feel like old friends. So I don't know. Aronok is so close to me that we'd probably drive each other nuts. So probably Alandria, I think. There you go. Apparently she's my favorite character too.
Okay, so can you give the viewers a sneak peek of the upcoming books in the series?
Well, yes. So, I mean, you won't get anywhere near reading reviews of this book without hearing that there's a big twist at the end. So there's no point in me trying to disguise it from you. There's a big twist at the end, and new information is revealed to not only the readers but also some of the 3 of the main characters. And so book 2, which I'm writing just now, is how they deal with that. They essentially find out what's going on, why it's going on, what's happened, and it changes everything for them, and they need to reassess how they're approaching everything. And so book 2 is all about what comes as a result of that twist, essentially, and what they have to refocus their energies on.
Okay.
With as much as I can say without a massive spoiler telling you what the twist at the end of the book is.
No, we don't want any spoilers. Okay, so I think we'll wrap it up here, and you can tell everyone where they can find you and your books.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. So the books are all available on Amazon, paperback, Kindle Unlimited. The audiobook is out now as well from Podium. You should also be able to order it from any bookstore. It should be available to order as paperback from any bookstore. And you can find me. I'm on Facebook. I've got a page for myself there. I am on Twitter at AuthorJLA. And I am on Instagram at Justin Lee Anderson Author.
Okay. So thank you for being here. It was a pleasure chatting with you today.
Thank you very much.
And Between the Pages Book Chat, we'll be back on Wednesday with another fantasy author. And that's it for today. So bye for now.
Bye.